As we began the topic of natural selection, a couple of basic principles were stated about what natural selection is, what it isn't. The idea that organisms do not spontaneously mutate at will. When there's a sudden change in the environment that they mutate to deal with. They cannot pass on features which they've changed in their life, acquired features. There is no inborn drive to perfection. So we said, what a natural selection isn't. And then we went through some basic steps about what it is. So first, we wanted you to recognize that populations vary in almost every type of trait. This is because of mutation and sexual reproduction. These are the two big causes of this variation. And then we went through a number of steps in a natural selection that you simply should recognize that there's an enormous number of offspring produced, but that natural resources are often limited, and therefore not all individuals survive to reproduce, etc. These were brought up in the giraffe neck natural selection interactives, as well as the finch natural selection interactives. And so, you should review that, and, there might be a question or two based on those interactives that you've seen before. There were 3 different types of natural selection given. There was stabilizing selection, directional selection, and disruptive selection. And in the activity, you saw graphs which would be associated with each if each was acting on a population. So you should be able to distinguish between their definitions and identify the graphs of each. Now, as populations separate and as they move towards becoming separate species, the genetic differences which have accumulated then make it difficult to reproduce. So 2 populations which are genetically different from each other, when they try to produce interspecific or hybrid offspring, the offspring may not be fertile. The offspring may not be viable. In some cases, the offspring are miscarried before birth. They do not complete development. And then so there's a number of negative consequences which can occur if 2 populations are too genetically distinct. And so therefore, populations have isolating mechanisms which they use to try to make sure that they only reproduce with populations of their species with whom they can reproduce without these problems in fertility. And so birds often recognize members of their group by the colors of their feathers or by their courtship song. In amphibians, very often it is a courtship song. Mammals often use pheromones. So there were some activities which we based on that. And so thus an individual's reproductive success is its ability to pass on its genes to the next generation and have offspring. Of course, we had gone through there are many biotic and abiotic factors which affect this, and so you should be able to name some biotic factors such as the ability to find food or predation, and some abiotic factors such as climate and the amount of sunlight, etc.